Sort of like the end of the
Can you tell
game.
the Middle East we're not using a nuclear weapon?
I would
on
never
anybody?
say that. I would never take any of my cards off the table.
How about Europe? We won't use it in Europe.
I'm not going to take it off the table.
You might
for
use it in
anybody.
Europe.
To live in our times is to live in the grasp of a deep and overwhelming madness. To see them truly is to know that this madness is merely symptomatic of a far greater disease. Capitalism, today reaching the final moments of its life. There is no way to restore profitability to the system without annihilating the species. Without a solution to this crisis, the Western imperialist bourgeoisie, who previously merely utilised postmodernity as a cultural weapon, have accepted its fundamental premises. This process has been intensified by the encroaching dominance of socio-ludic culture, which, having developed under conditions of bourgeois dominance, has served only to extend the cultural premises of its hegemonic ideology. The bourgeoisie deny reality, not only because the very culture they have created suggests that they do so, but because to see reality clearly, they must accept the end of their rule. Someone once said that it's easier to imagine the end of the world than to imagine the end of capitalism, and they are today being proven correct. There is a broadly held consensus among the international bourgeoisie that the world is today embroiled in some form of global confrontation. Yet our rulers' clarity ends here. The most important disagreement is over the fundamental character of this confrontation. Here, the Western imperialists broadly fall into two camps. The first, still numerically dominant in the West's political classes, imagines it simply: Cold War 2.0. The assumption that underwrites this is that the US and its allies will now stand shoulder to shoulder against Russia and China. This is a serious miscalculation. US imperialism and the EU imperialist bloc are being torn apart by antagonism. To assume that the confrontation ahead of us will simply be a second Cold War is to rely on a simulacrum, an image of reality which bears no relation to it. The conflict ahead of us is not bipolar, the struggle of two powers or blocs, but multipolar, the struggle of many. The confrontation is not primarily between communism and imperialism, but that of warring factions in a world dominated by imperialism. It is a world war, not a Cold War.
China is not a nation, it's a civilization, Han. The US is also an empire, more than a nation. Maybe tomorrow they will speak there. And then finally the Russian Federation. The world of tomorrow is a world of empires in which we Europeans and you British can only defend your interests, your way of life by doing it together.
Well, France's President Emmanuel Macron has taken other European leaders by surprise by criticising NATO. Now, in an interview with The Economist magazine, Macron said that the alliance was experiencing what he called brain death. Now, he said it was being undermined by a lack of coordination and by the unpredictability of US President Donald Trump.
Among those who accept this reality, Western military and secret services, a handful of politicians. Considerations are more pragmatic. Not only is there clearly a multipolar competition for dominance, war is already being waged. Whilst this may sound melodramatic, a clear analysis of contemporary military strategy and practice reveals the truth of it. Today, active combat exists under two strategies: grey zone and hybrid warfare. The first is the idea that confrontation may proceed indirectly, not by relying on secrecy, but by taking action where the definition of peace and war collapses bureaucratically. One example is well known. In Ukraine, Russian military are consistently active in unmarked green uniforms. Russia denies responsibility and is thus both at war and not at war, in plain view. The same is true of its real opponents, the US and the EU, who sponsored a coup in Kiev which saw Holocaust deniers take power and go on to wage war on Russia in the East. In response to Russia's involvement, this pair went further, imposing sanctions on it. This early example also contains an insight into the second tactical thread of this contest's present form: hybrid warfare. This describes the utilisation of all human civilization as an instrument of war. The examples given in Ukraine representing three arenas: irregular conventional forces, non-conventional forces, and economic warfare. The combination of these strategies ultimately describes a type of global postmodern warfare reliant upon the dissolving of the distinction between war and peace, and of a scale which no terrain may escape. This is made clear in view of this war's principal and first truly unique domain, the cyber realm. The known use of cyber warfare broadly falls into two categories: the targeting of infrastructure and information warfare. The first option is generally considered a red line when turned to a great power. As such, most active combat in the cyber realm between these powers takes the form of information warfare, today overwhelmingly located in civilian society, that is, on social media. This is clear in considering what little examples of this combat go reported. Two examples stand out as more common than any other: so-called fake news and bots. As we have said, fake news is more correctly thought of as disinformation. Unlike propaganda, which is intended to gather support for a political view or cause, disinformation is intended to cause chaos and division. This is achieved by producing false news stories, even to the extent of constructing fake sources for every perspective, disrupting the basis for consensus. Bots are automated social media accounts intended to spread this disinformation or more traditional propaganda, or accounts operated by state agents or soldiers. This allows action in the cybersphere to pursue both short and long-term goals in the framework of grey zone and hybrid warfare. Short-term objectives are rather broad, ranging from the creation of false pretexts for escalation to attempting to disrupt particular stories. Long-term objectives, however, amount to securing significant advantages over an opponent. Two examples. One hope is that one can meddle in the political direction taken by an opponent. For example, Britain's Integrity Initiative, a secret disinformation unit uncovered in 2018, tried to damage relations between Germany, its most important target, and Russia. Another hope is that the overwhelming chaos unleashed by constant disinformation will ferment broad social unrest. This possibility is heightened by two factors. Firstly, no great power is innocent. Secondly, alliances count for naught in this sphere. An active global war without political boundary is already in motion. The terrain it intends to conquer is us. However clever this might be, no one waging it seriously believes that it may avoid escalation. As anyone can see, when someone goes about telling you that they wish to dissolve the boundaries between peace and war, they have but one objective. They want a fucking war. Over the course of 2019, this has become undeniable. In particular, the US has become increasingly warlike, taking serious steps toward open confrontation. On the 15th of June, it announced cyber action against the Russian energy grid, an act of war. It was sharply followed by Britain, who announced that its special forces would be engaging Russia's Little Green Men on the 22nd of June. What is more, even this escalation's ultimate destination is known, although the timescale to arrive is by no means clear. On the 11th of June, the Pentagon published its first update to its nuclear doctrine in 11 years. The document suggests not only that nuclear arms might be used, but that they might restore strategic stability and should be considered at every stage of military planning, even as a minimum use of force. And here, plainly, is the truth of Western imperialist society and its ruling ideology today. One faction of the Western bourgeoisie clings to an imagined Cold War, blissfully sliding into Armageddon as it dreams of assured, mostly peaceful victory. Another accepts even that the end of the world is at stake, but is already carrying out the opening phases of an utterly inhuman conflict, as it cannot imagine a world without its rule. Postmodernity is thus ending in nightmare for a simple reason. It is a form of bourgeois ideological dominance, and there are no more capitalist solutions.